everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keep It Fictional, our wonderful weekly book chat. My name is Sadie, and I am here from the Port Moody Public Library to talk about books today, which is one of my favorite things. And I am here with some of my colleagues who also love to talk about books. And today I am joined by Virginia, Liz, Corene, and Fiona. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
So we are going to be talking today about one of my favorite things, and that is myths, legends, and fairy tales. I quite enjoy all of the mythological type of things, type of stories, fairy tales and legends as well. So that is what we are going to be telling. But specifically, we are going to be talking not about the original versions of these stories. We're going to be telling retellings today. So we're going to talk about all of the different retellings that have been told, hopefully with maybe some more modern spins on them. So we will see what everyone is talking about today. But before we get into that, I have a question for all of our librarians today. And that question is, what is your favorite fairy tale or myth or legend, if you have one? Give you maybe a few seconds to think about it. I will say, for myself, I really enjoy Greek mythology. So any story that kind of falls into the Greek mythological repertoire, I really, really enjoy. I think that there are some really negative stories that come out of that repertoire, but also some really interesting and positive stories that come out of the repertoire. And I think recently more people are looking at them and actually acknowledging that there are not always great associations with them. And I think that that's important. So I really enjoy delving into them, learning more about them, and then learning about how we can maybe shift those stories to make them more diverse, to make them more word that I'm looking for that I can't find right now. But just better stories in general, following that mythology. So I'm going to actually go to Corene first for this one. What do you have a favorite myth, legend, fairy tale?
This is really tough because I did a phase of all the mythology and all the myths, but the one I think that always struck me the most as a child and as an adult is the Seven Swans. And it follows your classic royal family, bad stepmother, and it is about a young princess who has 7 brothers, and they are mysteriously turned into swans by their evil stepmother. And so to save them from this fate, she cannot talk for 7 years and has to weave sweaters out of all of them out of briars. It's a really it's a dark story. Because eventually she gets kind of rescued by a prince who's like, hey, you don't talk and you know how to sew, come with me. And then she's accused of killing her baby. It's a lot going on. She's about to be burned at the stake. It's a plot heavy fairy tale. There's a lot that goes on there. And it deals with a lot of very dark tropes in it. So for what is ostensibly a part of Grimm's fairy tale repertoire, it's a chunky story. So Seven Brothers is I think what it's called.
Okay. I might have to read that one. That sounds
weird. It's weird.
Yeah. Liz, what about you? Do you have a favorite fairy tale, myth, or legend?
I can appreciate all sorts of myths and fairy tales, but one that really sticks out for me is Puss in Boots. So the antithesis to Corene's favorite, Puss in Boots is the story of a cat that was bequeathed to one of 3 brothers who is not very well off. And he's thinking, great, I got a cat. Yay. But this cat is no ordinary cat. He's very intrepid. He can talk. He can do many wonderful things. He can shapeshift. And as a result, he actually helps the ungrateful brother raise his station in life. And everybody lives happily ever after.
Very good. A classic. I was in a theatrical production of Puss in Boots when I was younger. And Cinder has decided to make an appearance.
I did not plan this at all.
Sure. Yeah. Cinder had planned it though. All right, Virginia, do you have a favorite myth, legend, or fairy tale?
I don't know if I do. But I guess when I was just thinking about like when I was a kid, I'm probably obsessed with Cinderella. Unfortunately, it's the first Disney movie that I saw in the theater. That's probably why, because it's the first movie I actually get to go see. And I remember like at the at one of the department store there was like the actual glass slipper, and I was like super like, you know, fascinated by it. And don't know why, but yeah, that's like when I was a kid, I guess that's what it was. I think same thing. A lot of the Greek myths, you know, like I you know, I don't know. I'm kind of obsessed with Persephone. Don't know why. The whole Orpheus and Eurydice story, like that, you know, like I guess those ones. I think as an adult probably, but yeah, I wouldn't say I have like a favorite. But Cinderella, I guess.
I have to just make a point of saying that Virginia, our resident horror and thriller and psychological thriller, is enjoying the stories of the underworld in the Greek mythology.
Wow. Never would have thought. But but I also just said a story about like a shoe, which you know me and like shoes, like so.
That's true. That's true. Varied tastes. All right, Fiona, what about you? Do you have a favorite?
I do, but I'm going to talk about other things for too long. I meander my way towards that question.
Okay.
I feel like I have a complicated relationship, especially with Grimm's fairy tales, where I get really obsessed and like read them all. I'm like, they're so interesting. And then you get to like a point where you just are like, oh my gosh, this is just like story soup. These don't make any sense, and we just keep telling them and telling them and telling them again, and they're probably so far from what they actually are, and they're so ridiculous, and then I get really angry. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever read Hans my Hedgehog. It's like about a half hedgehog, and in some of them he rides a rooster, and he plays the bagpipes, and it's just the oddest thing ever. Like, it's so weird.
It makes perfect sense, Fiona. I don't know what you're talking about.
But, I have a complicated relationship with Grimm, particularly. I like Hans Christian Andersen, kind of as the antithesis of like, sometimes it's a little more fleshed out, makes a little more sense. So the Snow Queen is actually my absolute favorite, and I love like the whole storybook with the pictures and then the play version. It's just so beautiful. I'm also a big fan of Muppet retellings of fairy tales.
Oh,
Like The Elves and the Shoemaker or The Emperor's New Clothes. And it's like Fozzie and it's so good.
Yeah. The Muppet Christmas Carol is still one of my like all-time favorite holiday movies. So
yeah,
I can understand that.
Better than a Mickey's Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
I'm more familiar with Muppets, and yeah. Not like as a concept, but in regards to Christmas Carol movies. And on that note,
Fight.
Tune in later while me and Corene go head to head on which Christmas Carol is the better one. Or maybe tune in for a holiday version of our book chat. It might resurface.
Just want to remind you of Michael Caine's singing voice, and I will end my argument there.
All right. That's fair.
It was almost love.
But it wasn't.
Almost always.
No, Korean's not going for it. All right. Well, as we ponder that, let us know in the comments if you have a favorite Christmas Carol retelling or other retelling as well. It does not have to be specifically a Christmas Carol. And we are going to go and see what Virginia has for her retelling today.
All right. That's okay. So the one that I have today is called The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. And this is a retelling of a story by H.P. Lovecraft called The Horror at Red Hook. Now, many of you know H.P. Lovecraft is one of the more influential horror writers out there. He's kind of created the whole subgenre called like the cosmic horror. In a nutshell, it's kind of like the fear that we have of something that is so beyond our comprehension that when we can't even like deal with it because it is so scary. That's kind of what, like, I don't know, a very, very bad description of what cosmic horror is. But more importantly, many of you probably also know that H.P. Lovecraft is a garbage person. He is racist, he is xenophobic, and all his horrible, horrible white supremacist attitudes are all over his stories and all over his writings. And a lot of writers like Victor Lavelle, who grew up reading Lovecraft as a kid, maybe not realizing what he's actually saying, get inspired by his stories and even, wanted to become horror writers just like him. And then as they grew up and realized what he's actually saying in some of these stories and the words that he used to describe people of color, and it's been said that like if he walks on the street and he sees somebody that is like an immigrant or somebody who is a people of color, he will cross the street and go the other side, like as if they are infectious, like they're contagious, that you're going to get something from them. Like he's that horrible of a person. So for a lot of writers that grew up reading him, it's very complicated. They like, as this book is actually dedicated to Lovecraft, and he says like with all the complicated feelings that I have. So what a lot of newer cosmic horror do is that they take all his monsters, they take his horrors, they take all these horrible things, scary things that he created, and basically just throw it back at his face and cram it down his throat and put all the people of color as the protagonists, battling all the horrors that he created, using those stories, using his style of stories to talk about racism, to talk about the horrors of the real world. And that's exactly what this book did. And I think that really makes it such a great retelling, because is using him to, using his stuff to showcase and to show exactly what he doesn't want people to see. So it is a novella. It's a very short novella, so I don't want to say too much about the story. The original story, The Horror of Red Hook, is I actually went and read it. Like, I didn't read Lovecraft when I was growing up, so I don't have any complicated feelings about it. I don't want to read him anymore now, in knowing that who he is. So I'm trying to read more the newer cosmic horror, but I did go back and read this story just because I feel like I should. And apparently, according to people who read a lot of Lovecraft, it's not a very good story. Anyway, it's about like an old Dutch man who decided that he needs to raise the ancient ones. So he got himself with these like demon worshippers so that he could wake them up or whatever. That's kind of the original story. So apparently not very good, but it is one of the ones with very blatantly racist descriptions of people of color and of immigrants, and just the way he described it is like unbelievable. Like, who is this guy anyway? So what Victor Lavelle in the Ballad of Black Tom, what he did is that he set it in 1920s New York, and it is about a young black man named Tommy Tester. He lived in Harlem, and Tommy watches his father takes a regular job as a construction worker, being paid much less than all his white counterparts, not being protected in a dangerous job because no union wants to have any black people in it. So he looked at his dad doing what he does to make a living, and he's like, I don't want to do that. That's no. So he ended up taking a lot of different random side jobs, one of them being connecting people with these supposedly forbidden books or magical artifacts, and then the other being like a musician, because what he recognized is that, well, in my neighborhood, I'm not really good. Like, I'm not a good singer. I'm not really a good guitar player. And, no one is going to pay me any attention in my neighborhood. But if I go to the white neighborhood, you just have to dress the part. You have to dress like what they expect a young jazz musician to look like, and that's how he get his like little musical gigs, as a side job. So one day he was in one of those neighborhoods playing his guitar, and a man walked up to him and said, "Hey, I like what you're doing. I'm having a party in about 3 days and at my house. I want you to come to play at my party. And here's $100 in advance, and when you finish, you're gonna get another 400. $500. You do not turn down $500. That will pay for his rent, his like food for at least 6 months for him and his dad." So he's like, "Yeah, fine, sure, I'll do that." But once he finished talking and the guy left, then there's two people that came to him, and one of them is a cop and the other one turns out to be a private investigator, and they wanted to know everything that went on between that little exchange, because they're telling him that they're actually hired by some of his relatives, the guy's relatives, because there has been some weird things going on in his house. The relatives think that he's like lost his mind. There's all these unsavory people gathering at his house, and they wanted to prove that he is like insane so that they can like get his inheritance and get his money basically. So, as a black person in a white neighborhood, talking to cops, he does what black people do, which is being, like looking down, don't make eye contact, making sure that like nothing you do is threatening or like sudden or anything like that. And he did all that, but he didn't tell them that he's going to go back to his house in 3 days. And now he's wondering, what kind of party and what kind of gathering is this going to be when he walks into his house in 3 days? This is a really good, it's like I said, a very short novel, so I won't say any more about it, but it is a really good introduction if you are curious about like the subgenre of horror, like cosmic horror, what that's like, and you don't want to read Lovecraft, like I do. I don't want to read Lovecraft. So try this. I think it's a really, really good sort of introduction to that. I would also say this is also a great novel for anyone who is interested in sort of a book that explores sort of the systemic racism, the Black experience, police brutality, all of that. Like I think it's still super relevant, even though this is sort of set in the 20s in New York. This is of course like still going on now, and so it's a really good relevant read for the times, and a great speculative fiction. So again, it is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. My rant is over. So
it was a good and justified rant. So I'm always in support of a justified rant. Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. Corene, I think you are muted.
Yes, so many writers taking on Lovecraft. I think N.K. Jemisin's The City in the City is another one that just came out that kind of like takes that by the throat. So I'm going to read that one too. Thank you, Virginia. It might be a book that we actually both enjoy.
I'd say wait until you read it, right? Like don't make any.
I know.
Like...
Yeah.
All right. Well, they are going to go to Liz next and see which retelling you would like to talk about today, Liz.
Well, I kind of picked something different. I kind of deviated from the whole fairy tale and myth theme of retelling. But this is a retelling nonetheless. So once upon a time, there was a young woman named Hillary Rodham. And she met a gentleman named Bill Clinton. They both achieved their law degrees. He went on to become president of the United States of America. She went on to become First Lady as well as Secretary of State, among other achievements. So that is the known version of this so-called story of Hillary Rodham Clinton. However, there is a retelling of this living person's story, and it is called Rodham, and it has been written by Curtis Sittenfeld. Now, admittedly, I am partway through this book because, to be quite honest, I don't usually read retellings. And on top of that, initially I had no interest in reading this book. So when this was first announced, I thought, this book has many strikes against it for my tastes. First off, it can be considered women's fiction, which I don't read a lot of. I read some, but not a lot. The second, I assume that the author was a man, Curtis Sittenfeld. So what would a man have to say about Hillary Rodham Clinton? Turns out Curtis Sittenfeld is not a man. And also, the idea of talking about the personal life and thoughts of a living figure without their express permission seemed kind of creepy to me, to say the least. However, needing a retelling and also kind of warming up to the fact that, maybe in light of recent events, let's say the past 4 years or so, it would be kind of interesting to see how the premise of Rodham, like Curtis Sittenfeld, plays out. So the book opens as it did in real life, where Hillary Rodham has graduated from Wellesley and she has entered Yale Law School. And this is at the beginning of the 1970s. She has met Bill Clinton at Yale Law School and they begin a relationship together. So that is more or less factual, with the author's embellishment about how their relationship actually unfolds. Now, as the story progresses, we're to find out, what if Hillary didn't actually marry Bill? So by her own admission, Bill had proposed to her several times before she finally decided to say yes. He was entering a career in politics in Arkansas, and she wasn't really sure that being the wife of a politician, let alone in Arkansas, was the correct trajectory for her and her ambitions. So in light of everything that has happened recently with her bid for the presidency in 2016 that didn't pan out, regardless of what your opinions about her politics are, I think it's undisputable that the fact that she has been involved with Bill Clinton and married to him for all these years has perhaps had an influence on people's perceptions of her as Hillary Rodham. And instead, she is viewed as Hillary Rodham Clinton or Hillary Clinton. That has become a very defining aspect of this woman's life, a woman who has achieved much and has proven herself to be as intelligent as anybody out there. So with that, I'm looking forward to seeing where the author, Sittenfeld, takes Hillary Rodham's life, minus Bill. Apparently in this story, they will cross paths many times as they both navigate the US political system. It is a very easy read, a bit of a page turner. So if you are interested in American politics, you'll definitely get a lot of that factual information of events and things that Hillary was involved in her life throughout her political career. I gotta admit, though, it is a little weird reading about intimate details of a relationship for somebody who A, is living, is very well known, and B, is also she's a more mature woman. And so to picture them in the heyday of their youth in the 70s is a little bit odd at times. But if you can move past that, if you are interested in American politics and also interested in, learning of one person's retelling of, or a possible telling of what a woman's life could be when she's not defined by the man she is married to, then you might also want to pick up Rodham by Curt Sittenfeld.
I'd be very curious to know if she has commented on the book, or if she is familiar with it.
I have looked for that information out of curiosity, maybe to, temper my guilt at reading something about the perceived personal life of somebody, potential personal life. I have not found any comment.
That in and of itself might be telling. Yeah. All right. Corene, you're considering. It looks like
Like,
you're
would you
considering.
read the fan fiction of your own life? Would you want to?
When you say fan fiction, no, I don't want to get hate mail.
It's fan fiction.
It kind of is fan fiction. It does
Mhm.
paint her so far in a very complimentary light.
Yeah, and like fan fiction doesn't necessarily have to be like very, very positive or very negative. It's just like a reimagining of something. It's very much real person fanfic that was published. So
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
So far, so good.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are going to go to Corene next. Corene, what retelling are you going to tell us about today?
So I chose one that definitely does not take place in the real world about real people. This was an agonizing choice for me. I went back and forth texting Sadie with my choices about every 5 minutes until pretty much we started this chat. So this was really hard. Again, like a long time ago, I read almost every fairy tale retelling, every single thing based on Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology or anything. But for a while, haven't really picked it up. So I had to kind of go back and think of what was the one that I most recently enjoyed. I kind of looked at mysteries. So House of Silk, which was the Anthony Horowitz pastiche Sherlock Holmes novel, or maybe Sophie Hannah's new Poirot novels. But in the end, I decided to go for something like a little bit more traditional when we think about the word retelling. And I chose Virginia's favorite story, the classic story of Cinderella. And I chose Marissa Mayer's kind of fantasy sci-fi retelling of it, which is, of course, Cinder. These are the brand new paperback covers. Ooh, look at that illustration inside. So fancy, so new. And this is the story of Cinder, who is growing up in New Beijing. She is a cyborg. So she is human, but she has certain augmentations on her body that she doesn't remember exactly how she got them when she was a very young child. There was an accident, and one of her arms and her legs and part of her brain had to be replaced by mechanical parts. And maybe for that reason, Cinder is a very, very good mechanic. She has an excellent reputation in the kingdom, so much so that when Prince Kai, the handsome, young, very eligible prince of their kingdom, is looking for someone to help repair his personal android, he decides to forego the usual palace mechanics and go looking for Cinder herself to try and fix it. Of course, they meet. They're both young and gorgeous and good looking, and they fall in love. But Cinder has the secret that in her society, she is a cyborg, and cyborgs are very much looked down upon. And Prince Kai has kind of got problems of his own. This takes place in a world after there was a fourth world war, as well as the fact that there are aliens that live on the moon, and they have mind control powers, and there's a plague that is taking over the entire earth called Lutmosis, to which there is no cure. And there is a delegate coming from the dark side of the moon who say that they have a cure for this disease, but in order for them to give it to the people who live on Earth, they will need Prince Kai to get married to their crown princess. However, should Prince Kai agree to this, essentially he will be held hostage by the Lunar's mind control for the rest of his life and live as a puppet. So everyone's got problems. This is a very fun, very light YA retelling. It's actually part of a series. There are 4 books in the series, each of them introducing a brand new character, which is a retelling of another classic grim legend. So there is Scarlet, which is Little Red Riding Hood, Cress, which is Rapunzel, and Winter, which is kind of Snow White, I think. It's a very fun, very quick series. So if you're looking for like a breezy YA with like fantastic locales, a little bit of sci-fi, lots of romance, then you can definitely pick this one up, either in their hardcovers or their beautiful new paperbacks.
Ooh.
I think it's up your alley, Sadie.
I was thinking that as well, but then you started talking about aliens, and I don't know how I feel
They're not
about that.
really
part of it.
aliens. They're just people who live on the moon. But I guess technically, if you're living on the moon, you're not an Earthling, so you're an alien. So they're lunars, but they're not like they don't have like tentacles.
Okay.
They just look like regular people, but they can do mind control.
Okay. I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot and see.
Yeah.
Well, it is time for us to ask our existential questions. And this week we have more than one. Virginia, you are muted. I appreciate your...
Why another
I
one?
thought
Why
the first
another
question
one?
was our existential.
Just some really quick either-or things. So we are going to play a quick round of Would You Rather with books. So I feel like I'm not going to pick each person. You can speak up as you wish. Our first question is, would you rather have dinner with your favorite author or your favorite character? Okay.
Character.
And who would, do you know who that would be, Virginia? No.
No.
Author.
Story.
Fiona, was that you that said author or Liz that said author?
Liz.
Yeah.
I'm going to say author too, because otherwise it just breaks my understanding of reality, and I'm not ready to go there right now.
That's fair.
I think character though, because authors can be boring. Like they can
disappoint you. I don't want to be disappointed by a real person. I'm okay with being disappointed by a fake person.
Right. So a couple for character, couple for author. All right. Next question. Would you rather read a book that has a horrible cliffhanger or read a book in which your favorite character is killed?
What kind of questions
The
are
ones
these?
that make you question the entire world.
I think
Everything?
favorite character killed. I
Oh.
like some sadness in my books.
Cliffhanger. Because you're assuming they're going to write a next one.
I'll go with character because the author can always bring them back in the next book.
Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger. All right, we are split as well. I think I might go with cliffhanger on this one. 'Cause yeah, if as long as there's another one coming out. If there's no other one coming out, then
What did you say for the previous one, Sadie?
I didn't.
Oh.
I think I'm gonna go with
Good catch,
character.
Fiona.
I think I'm
Good
gonna go with
catch.
character.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there's some fun characters that I would enjoy getting to know. Okay. Question number 1. Would you rather read everything that's available in a series right away and then have to wait a really, really long time for the last one? Or would you rather wait to read the entire series in its entirety when it is all released?
Read it now. You could be you don't know what the future holds. Yeah.
See, I used to think that, and I still do. I'll just if a new one come out, I can't resist, right? I can't help it. I'm just gonna go read it. However, I know that because I can't remember anything from a series, it's actually better for me if I read all of them at the same time. At least a substantial amount of them has come out, and then if I tackle that series, it's better for my brain, I think.
I get that. I don't reread things. We've talked about this before, but the few things that I have reread are when a new book in a series comes out and I need to remind myself of what has happened because it's been so long since I've read the rest of them. All right, so we have 1, read it all at once. 1, read it and have to wait. Liz, Fiona, how do you weigh in on this?
I don't mind the anticipation. I almost feel like if I read the whole series at once, the loss would be greater. When the last book, when you reach the end of the last book, you spent that one big chunk of time on it, and then it's all over. Whereas if it's kind of spread out, you've already had the pain of longing for the next book. and then you get the high of reading the next book when it does come out, and then the low of when it's over, and then it's a more gradual, as opposed to a big high reading the whole series, and then bam, you're done.
And let's
Nothing to look
remember, Liz
forward
doesn't
to.
actually really read series. She
Yeah.
has said that
No,
before.
no.
That's why she's saying that.
So this is all hypothetical for Liz.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Fiona, what do you think on this one?
I agree with Liz's sentiment entirely. I think that
Also because she doesn't read series, I have a feeling.
I read some series sometimes. I like
Name 2.
duologies. My 5 Worlds, the graphic novel, number 4 just came in, and I've been waiting for that like all year. I'm pretty excited about that. It was a gratifying wait.
And you're gonna read it as soon as you get it instead of waiting.
Yeah.
All right. All right, for our final question, I feel like I know how this one is going to go already. Would you rather read a book that transports you to the past or to the future?
See, you should just guess.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
Right.
Two I know. Virginia, I'm going to say future. Corene, I'm going to say past. Oh.
Are we that predictable, Corene?
We are.
Got it.
Liz, I'm going to say future. And Fiona, I'm going to say past. But I don't know as much about those ones.
I think it's pretty. I like both, but I think past squeaks by. Yeah.
I'm kind of in the middle. I'm more of a present person. I know that's not the question.
Yeah.
So I will choose the past.
Okay. All right.
See, I would have reversed those. I would have thought that Fiona read more about the future, just because I know you read more sci-fi graphic novels.
Fair. That's fair.
But I really like an unknown time, like when you are reading about sci-fi, but it doesn't like connect it to the present world. I kind of like that.
So,
It has no star date. It has no star date.
Yeah, exactly.
And that I struggle with. Like, I feel like I need to know wherever it is, I need to know where it sits in relation to the real world, even if it doesn't connect at all. Like, I need to know that it is disconnected and how it's disconnected, if that makes sense.
I need to know if people have cell phones. That's important, because if all of their problems could be solved by just calling someone on a cell phone, then the plot just doesn't work for me.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. And I feel like everyone knows which one I would rather go to.
Yeah.
So, the past. All right. Well, thank you for participating in our game of Would You Rather with books. Let us know in the comments if there are specific ones that you gravitate towards with those. All right. The next one up, we have Fiona. Fiona, if you'd like to tell us about your retelling.
Absolutely. So I also chose a non-fairy tale retelling. So I'm going to talk about Pride by Evie Zaboy. And it is called a Pride and Prejudice remix. So I think that is a pretty good description. Yes, so this is in fact a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. So, not really a traditional fairy tale, but definitely something that there are lots of adaptations and retellings of. And it got me thinking about how, like, sometimes fairy tales feel like kind of irrelevant, and maybe we have like new old stories that we retell again and again. They have that like cultural significance. And, maybe they originated in a different format, like Pride and Prejudice. Because I do love a good retelling of a classic book. So, in this book, it follows Zuri, who lives in Bushwick. And it is a YA story. Or it is a YA book, and it talks a lot about gentrification and community. And of course, there's a love story. The Darcys move across the street from Zuri and her family, and they are part of the new Bushwick crowd, part of the gentrifying community coming in. So they have a great big house. They're really well off. Darcy, what's his name in this? It is, let me just see, Darius is very kind of preppy, and of course Zuri looks down on him and is like, oh, you're so like fake and so preppy, and she's not very fond of him. I really appreciated that the romance didn't seem like a really central part of it. It really focuses a lot on Zuri and her strong personality and her future. She wants to go to college and then come back and protect her community from gentrification, essentially. And so, well, obviously it's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, so the romance is important, but it wasn't like the only thing that happened in the book. I also felt like it had a really good voice for a YA. You know, sometimes things are sort of more on the side of like the main characters frustrating and like obnoxious, and you're like, just stop complaining all the time. Whereas Zuri was like, she was a really like strong character, and like she was stubborn, but she didn't have that sort of like adolescent voice that can be frustrating in YA sometimes. I don't mean to trash YA. That was entirely unintentional. I love YA. Yeah, so it was an excellent retelling. I definitely recommend it for people who like Pride and Prejudice retellings. Like, I feel like you could just read for a whole year and like only read Pride and Prejudice retellings, and it's so fun to just sort of like you know, find those story beats and be like, oh, they introduced a new character. Who is that going to be? And that's something I really love about reading those retellings, is it just sort of like piecing things together as you read it. And this was really gratifying in that way. Yeah, so definitely highly recommend it. I don't know how exciting it would be if you haven't read or don't like Pride and Prejudice. It still has a good like story at the baseline, and I found all the like aspects about community and gentrification particularly interesting and a lot of fun. And I actually listened to the audiobook version, which was excellent. So would recommend the audiobook if you were going to pick it up.
And I believe it has been optioned by HBO to be a brand new television series.
Awesome!
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you're not familiar with that story, if you can still get something out of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It almost like, I don't know if any of you have watched the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, but I feel like it would be like a good companion to that, of like really taking it on its own, like adding a lot and making it its own world and its own story, but then having these fun like nods to the original Pride and Prejudice. Yeah.
Maybe that will be my in to Pride and Prejudice. I'll start with that one and then
I don't know,
not the way to do it.
You're not there already.
Never read it. I'm not a classics person. I feel like I know. I'm sorry, Corene. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Just talk about your book, Sadie.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So the book that I am going to be talking about is a retelling of a legend that I think a lot of people are familiar with, even if you have not necessarily read the full story. It involves a young boy who is mentored and taught by a wizard named Merlin to become king, become the once and future king. And this is, of course, the King Arthur story. In some versions, he pulls a sword from a stone, thus indicating that he is the ruler. In some versions, a lady of the lake gives him the sword. There's a variety of different versions of this story, even within the legend and even within the mythology of it. Now, the story that I'm going to be talking about doesn't change any of that. Everything with the original King Arthur story happened exactly the way that it said it did. But this is now many, many, many years, centuries later, and this story touches on how this myth and how this legend is still affecting people today and is still relevant today. So the story that I'm going to be talking about is Legendborn by Tracy Dion. This is a brand new book. I mentioned it in our back to school book chat. It was coming out in September and I was really excited to read it. In my mind, it lived up to all of the excitement and all the hype that I had heard about it. And this story revolves around Bree Matthews. Now, the night before Bree's mother died, they had a big fight. Bree and her best friend Alice had just been accepted into the early college program at the UNC Chapel Hill campus. This program is designed for 16 and 17-year-olds, and it gives them a chance to live on campus in their last couple of years of high school, taking university-style classes and preparing them for college. Now, Bree's mom was not very happy about Bree being accepted into this program. Bree's mom herself went to this school, didn't really talk about it all that much, but did not want Bree to go to this program. So they fought, they yelled. Next morning, they didn't talk to each other. Later that day, Bree's mother is in a car accident and is killed. Bree decides that she's still going to go to the early college program. So this is now the fall, a few months after her mother's death, and she arrives at the school with her best friend Alice. And on their very first night there, they are off in the forest at a party, and she witnesses something a bit strange. She witnesses a kind of a piece of energy in the air that seems to be feeding off of other students. And at this party, everyone is told to leave. There's one or two students there that tell everyone else to leave, tell them to go home, it's time to leave. But for some reason, Bree does not leave. And so she's standing there and she witnesses these two students start to fight with this energy. What she comes to learn is a demon. And as this night goes on, she starts to remember some things. And she starts to remember some things about the night that her mother was killed. Most specifically, when she is in the hospital and she is talking to a policeman in the hospital, and he tries to tell her things that she is starting to remember didn't actually happen. So as Bree kind of goes through her day and goes through her night, she starts to realize that somebody tried to change her thinking and take away her memories. But for some reason, she's not sure why, when it worked on everyone else, it did not work on her. So Bree is taken by the police and she is taken back to the school. As a Black student, she is dealing with aggression from the police officers. She is dealing with racism from the police officers. Just by speaking up, they are telling her that she's being aggressive and that she has to stop yelling, stop being so angry. And this is not what she really expected coming from this school. She wasn't expecting this. So Bree decides the next day that she is going to try and figure out exactly what's going on. So the next day she's walking and she sees this energy again and she follows it. She decides to run after it. So she follows it and she sees this gigantic demon that has emerged. She's walking with a fellow student, and this student all of a sudden takes out a sword and kills the demon. She has no idea what's going on. She doesn't know where this demon came from. She doesn't know who this other student is to have this sword. So as Bree goes through her school day, she decides that she's going to figure this out. She decides that this is probably connected to her mother's death in some way, and she's going to figure out how these two things are connected. So she recruits this student, whose name is Nick, to introduce her to a secret society. And Nick has his own issues with the society. We don't know what they are, but he can get her in. And so he gets her in as a recruit for this society, and she starts to learn that this society is full of what are called Legendborns. And these are people who are part of the original line of the Knights of the Round Table. So their families were somehow related to the Knights of the Round Table. And every so often, the spirits from the knights come and inhabit these people if there's going to be a battle. And that battle is coming up. And so Bree goes into this world, starts to learn about how King Arthur, the King Arthur story, is more than just legend. She also starts to learn how she might be connected to the King Arthur story in ways that she doesn't know. There are Merlins who have magic. There are various students who, some of them are very opening and welcome to her. Some of them see her just as a way to diversify the secret society. And it is her story of how she kind of discovers that and how she figures out exactly what's going on and what is actually happening with this Legendborn society. It is a very powerful story. It talks a lot about the slavery and racism that surrounds this university campus, the slaves who built the campus, as well as Bree's family connection to those slaves and how they are connected to this society of Legendborns as well. It deals with systemic racism. It deals with kind of how that is seen in today's society and how it is obviously how it is still very, very present in everyday life as well. So if you like King Arthur stories, if you like stories about really strong female characters, magic, Tracy Dion has created at sometimes can be a little bit confusing system of magic and world, but a very, very rich and really interesting world and system of magic, then I would definitely recommend Legendborn by Tracy Dion. All right. Well, we have come to the end of our Retellings book talk. I would like to thank my fellow librarians for indulging me and talking all things fairy tales, myths, and legends today. And thank you everyone who is watching now or watching later as well. We are very happy to have you join us, and let us know if you have favorite retellings. Let us know what your favorites are, and hopefully you may have found a new book today. So thank you again to everyone. We will see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.